It started with a scream, a shrill, drawn-out wail that shattered the stillness of our quiet cul-de-sac, followed by the unmistakable click of a cell phone camera and the accusing shout, "I have it all on video." If you've ever lived under the rule of an HOA, Karen, you know the kind of chaos that can unfold from something as simple as pulling into the wrong parking spot? But in my case, what followed wasn't just another petty neighborhood dispute. It was a full-blown investigation. 2 police cruisers, and a woman nearly getting herself arrested for trying to control a man she didn't realize was an undercover FBI agent. This story isn't just about drama, it's about truth, exposure, and the danger of judging people by appearances. So, if you've ever dealt with HOA madness, or wondered what happens when the wrong person gets a little too much power, you'll want to stay until the end. Subscribe to Sham Stories now, because what you're about to read is real, raw, and absolutely unforgettable. Now, let's rewind. It was a warm Friday afternoon when I moved into Rose Hill Pines, a gated suburban neighborhood ruled not by reason but by fear. The woman behind that fear was Karen Delaney, the self-appointed enforcer of the Homeowners Association. She wasn't technically the president, but she might as well have been. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose like a badge of superiority, she spent every waking moment patrolling lawns, measuring mailbox heights, and issuing citations, like she was running a military base instead of a community of retirees, teachers, and working families. The first day I arrived was immediately greeted by Karen's cold gaze as I parked my dark blue SUV in front of my newly purchased home. "You can't park there," she said, not even offering a hello. I glanced at the empty curb. "Why not?" "Because this side is reserved for emergency access," she snapped, tapping her laminated HOA guideline sheet. I simply moved my car into the driveway and thanked her. But her eyes lingered too long on my license plate. "New York," she muttered. "We'll see about you." I hadn't even finished unpacking before the first violation notice appeared. Taped to my door, my trash can placement was unsightly, even though I hadn't taken it out yet. Over the next few days, it only escalated. Notes on my mailbox. A citation for a fence height discrepancy that didn't exist. Then came the confrontation. I was walking my dog in, aging golden retriever named Duquin. Karen appeared out of nowhere and accused me of letting my dog relieve himself on a lawn that wasn't mine. I pointed out that I had a bag in hand and had already cleaned it, but she wasn't having it. "You people think you can do whatever you want," she spat. "I don't care who you work for." That last comment stuck with me. It was a strange thing to say. I had been careful not to attract attention. I kept to myself, dressed modestly, and didn't speak about my job. Officially, I was a regional compliance consultant for a logistics firm. Unofficially, I was a field agent with the Bureau, currently on administrative leave after an extended operation in Arizona. My presence in Rose Hill wasn't just to enjoy peace and quiet, it was to observe a local politician under federal review. The only reason I bought the house was because it sat 2 doors down from the councilman in question. But Karen didn't know that, and if she did, she would have made smarter decisions. The breaking point came exactly 2 weeks after I moved in. That morning I took Duke out for a walk and noticed Karen pacing in front of my driveway with a phone in her hand. She was talking to someone, and her voice was just loud enough to catch snippets. "Yes, he's threatening. Yes, he's armed. No, I don't feel safe." I froze. Was she talking about me? I stepped forward and she spun around, her face immediately morphing into one of fear and dramatics. "Stay back," she screamed, putting her phone on speaker. "This is him. He's threatening me now." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or be horrified. "Karen, I haven't said a word to you." "He has a dog," she shrieked into the phone. "It's aggressive." I've told him before. Couldn't believe what I was hearing. Duke, who was practically falling asleep on his leash, looked up at me, confused. Minutes later, 2 police cars rolled into the neighborhood, lights flashing. Neighbors came out to see what was going on. Karen pointed at me with dramatic flair. "That's him. That's the man I told you about." The officers stepped out, hands resting near their holsters, and approached carefully. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance. Can you explain what happened?" I stayed calm. Years of bureau training taught me how to navigate confrontations. "Yes, officer. I was walking my dog. She called 911 and claimed I was threatening her. I haven't even spoken to her today until now. Karen cut in. He's dangerous. I think he's a spy or something. That last comment got a raised eyebrow from one of the officers. I handed over my ID. My name's David Morgan. This is my house. I haven't violated any laws. Appreciate it if you verified my credentials quietly. The officer stepped aside and ran my information. His posture changed when he came back. Sir, ... are you ... with the bureau? I didn't answer aloud, just nodded slightly. His eyes widened. Understood. We'll take care of this. Karen looked confused as the tone of the conversation shifted. Wait, what's going on? She demanded. Is he being arrested? The officer turned to her. Ma'am, we've reviewed the situation. There's no threat here. We're going to have to ask you to stop making false reports. False? She screeched. I have the right to feel unsafe? He moved here out of nowhere. He walks around like he owns the place. Ma'am, that's not a crime, the officer said sternly. Calling 911 to harass someone is... Her mouth fell open. The neighbors started whispering. Phones were out. Videos were being taken. For the first time, the HOA queen was on the defensive. The officers left after taking statements. Karen stormed off to her house, slamming the door. So hard it echoed. That evening, a printed note appeared in every mailbox and official notice from the HOA warning residents about confrontations and urging them to report suspicious behavior. It didn't mention names, but we all knew what it was. But Karen's obsession didn't end there. It evolved. Over the next week, she began following me when I left the neighborhood. Once, she parked across from a local coffee shop and stared through the window the entire time I was inside. Another day, I caught her crouching behind her hedges as I drove home. I even found a small GPS tracker hidden in my rear, bumper sloppily installed. I removed it and took it straight to the local police. I didn't tell them it was likely hers. I didn't need to. The situation had escalated beyond HOA drama. It had turned into a matter of harassment and surveillance. Karen had no idea she was messing with a man who knew the law better than she ever could. But she was about to find out because I had just received a call from my bureau contact. The councilman I'd been monitoring had scheduled a secret meeting with someone suspected of funneling HOA funds into illegal PACs, and the meeting was happening right here in Rose Hill Pines. In my next-door neighbor's backyard, Karen, in all her delusional vigilance, had unwittingly placed herself right in the middle of a federal operation. The next morning brought a thick layer of silence to Rose Hill Pines. It's a kind that hinted something big was on the horizon. And it wasn't just another of Karen Delaney's early patrols with her clipboard in hand. By 7 a.m., I had already received encrypted intel from my bureau contact confirming that Councilman Brett Hanley, the corrupt official I was unofficially observing, would be meeting a donor of interest at a neutral location, which I already knew to be his backyard, conveniently located 2 doors down from mine. I went into full preparation mode, slipping out of my house in gym clothes to keep up the illusion of my boring civilian cover. I waved politely at neighbors, including Tom and Rita across the street, who were raking leaves, and even gave a nod to Karen, who stood glaring at a neighbor's mailbox like it had committed a federal offense. Her hair was tied tightly into a bun, her polo shirt tucked in with military precision, and a fresh stack of HOA violation slips bulging from her folder. Your trash bin is 2 inches off the edge, she called out the moment I passed by her house. Thanks. I'll adjust it, I replied smoothly, without breaking stride. Already used to the routine of ignoring her theatrics, but today wasn't about bins or fences or dogs. It was about catching the person funneling illegal political donations through a fake property development fund. And Karen, nosy and power-hungry as she was, had the potential to ruin everything. By 10 a.m., I had my monitoring equipment in place, a directional microphone aimed through a line of shrubs, high-res lens mounted discreetly through my upstairs window, and an encrypted tablet syncing everything live to a remote bureau drive. The key was to remain invisible, and Karen's paranoia threatened that invisibility. She was already on the move, pacing her driveway with her usual look of suspicion, eyeing every car, every person walking by. Around noon, Brett's backyard began to show signs of activity. Two large men in suits arrived in a black SUV with tinted windows and made no effort to hide their presence. One of them scanned the surroundings with military precision. Definitely not your average political donors. I recognized one from a bureau profile, Victor Navarro, a known middleman between questionable real estate developers and campaign staff. This meeting would be big. Karen, who always had one eye on her neighborhood and the other on imaginary threats, was getting twitchier by the second. At 12:30 sharp, I recorded Brett stepping out into his yard with a leather briefcase in one hand and a fake grin on his face. He extended a hand to Navarro, who shook it without smiling. They sat under a patio umbrella, out of sight from the street but clearly visible from my vantage point. I turned on the microphone, clear voices, better than expected. Stammering through introductions, while Navarro cut straight to business. We want the zoning pushed through before September. You'll get the rest once the permits are cleared, Navarro said bluntly. This is off book. You understand what happens if anyone finds out? Brett swallowed hard and nodded. My HOA has been flexible with cover developments before. The funds are secure. I kept recording, heart pounding, because this wasn't just an ethical, it was criminal. Then came a knock at my door, sharp, persistent rapping that nearly made me jump. I peered through the peephole, and there she was, Karen, holding a violation slip and tapping her foot like she was about to explode. I opened the door halfway. Good afternoon, she barked. We need to talk about your bushes. They extend 1.2 feet into the common easement. That's a violation. It's not a good time, I said, trying to keep the door from opening. Too wide and revealing the surveillance rig on my dining table, but Karen had that look in her eyes, the one that said she'd found something to latch onto and wouldn't let go. Are you recording something? She asked suddenly. I saw wires in your window and your lights are on upstairs. I'm a contractor, I replied calmly. Home inspections. I was testing equipment, but she wasn't buying it. You're not fooling me, she hissed. You think I don't know what you're doing? Ever since you moved in, strange cars have been parked nearby, and your dog doesn't even bark like a normal dog. I almost laughed, but her tone was too sharp. Karen, unless you have an actual reason to be here, I'm going to close the door now. I'm calling 911, she declared. You're hiding something, and I'm reporting a threat to our neighborhood. You're making a mistake, I warned her. But she was already walking down my porch with her phone out, speaking loudly into it. I cursed under my breath, shut the door, and rushed upstairs to pause the recording just as Navarro slid a thick envelope across the table to Brett. If cops showed up now, the entire sting could be blown. Within minutes, I heard sirens approaching. Unbelievable. She really called them again. I pulled my gear into the closet, powered down everything, and stashed the tablet into a locked drawer. By the time 2 patrol cars pulled up, the meeting in Brett's backyard had dispersed. Navarro and his partner disappeared through the back gate. I watched helplessly as Karen stood proudly at the curb, gesturing toward my house like she had just saved the world. The officers knocked, this time more annoyed than concerned. Sorry to bother you again, Mr. Morgan, one said. We got a call again about suspicious activity. Can we come in? Only if you have a warrant, I replied firmly. Officer gave me a look and nodded. Understood. We'll just make a note. Frankly, this isn't the first call we've had from Ms. Delaney, and we're starting to see a pattern. Karen overheard that and marched over. He's hiding something. Look at his windows. His wiring, he has surveillance equipment. The officer held up a hand. Ma'am, we've spoken to Mr. Morgan. There's no cause for concern. You're not listening? She shouted. He's dangerous. He's probably not even who he says he is. I stepped out onto the porch, keeping calm. Karen, do you have any evidence of wrongdoing? Are you just making accusations based on paranoia? That's when something remarkable happened. Tom, the neighbor from across the street, walked over and said, Actually, officer, I've got video of Karen pacing around his car yesterday and tugging on his mailbox. She's been harassing him since day one, another neighbor chimed in. And I've seen her sneaking through bushes with binoculars. One by one, voices rose in my defense. For the first time, Karen stood there speechless. The officers took statements from the neighbors and left, giving me an apologetic nod. Karen went home fuming. I returned inside, knowing that, while I had avoided disaster, the surveillance recording had ended just moments before the bribe was exchanged. It was enough to keep the investigation alive, but not enough for prosecution. I sent a secure message to my bureau contact explaining the situation and flagged Karen as a possible interference risk. Then something unexpected happened. Late that evening, as dusk fell over the neighborhood and cicadas hummed in the trees, my doorbell rang again. Expecting Karen or more trouble, I checked the camera feed and was surprised to see a teenager. It was Kyle, Karen's son. I opened the door. Cautiously, "Mr. Morgan," he said awkwardly. "I just wanted to say, I think what my mom's doing is wrong." That caught me off guard. "I've been watching too. I know she follows you. I saw her try to put something under your car once." I told her it was crazy, but she won't listen to me. He handed me a small flash drive. "She has cameras. She records everything." I copied a few files I thought you should see. He looked nervous, glancing behind him. "Please don't tell her it was me." I took the drive, nodded, and told him he did the right thing. When I plugged it into a secure laptop and opened the files, I was stunned. One video showed Navarro and Brett shaking hands. Another, more damning, captured audio from Karen's own backyard. She had bugged her property with motion-triggered microphones. One clip had Navarro admitting, "Your HOA silence is part of the deal. Keep them busy with rules, and no one notices the money." My heart skipped. This wasn't just useful, it was critical. Karen had unwittingly gathered the evidence I needed, all while trying to frame me. I compiled the clips and sent them through bureau channels immediately. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the case was about to break wide open. But she wasn't done yet. Karen had one more move to play, and this time it wasn't just a 911 call. It was something far more dangerous. The next morning began with a chilling silence, the kind that makes the air feel heavy before anything even happens. I sat at the kitchen table nursing black coffee, staring at the encrypted flash drive Karen's own son had handed me the night before. It was still plugged into my secure laptop, having already been copied, verified, and transmitted to my bureau contact. The audio and video files she'd unknowingly recorded had captured a level of corruption that would send Brett Hanley and his shadowy backers into full panic mode once it went public. But while I expected retaliation from them, I hadn't predicted the fury Karen would unleash the moment she discovered she was the one who provided the nail in the coffin. By 9 a.m., she was back outside with a fresh storm on her face. Something had changed. Her usual performative paranoia had been replaced by frantic movement, a paranoia laced with fear. She was pacing with her phone glued to her ear, glancing at my house, pointing at it, even waving her arms dramatically to someone on the other end. From the upstairs window, I zoomed in with my lens and caught a glimpse of her mouth. "He's spying on me. He hacked my cameras. I think he's with the government." So, she finally figured it out. Or at least enough of the truth to make herself dangerous. The problem was, she wasn't wrong anymore. Her backyard surveillance system had picked up a corrupt city councilman, planning a federal crime thanks to her invasive obsession with everyone else's business. But now, knowing that the footage had somehow left her hands and landed in mine, she was grasping for control, trying to regain whatever power she thought she'd lost. She didn't know how far over her head she'd wandered. That afternoon, things escalated. I had just returned from walking Duke when I found a city inspector waiting in front of my house, clipboard in hand, and an uncomfortable look on his face. "You're Mr. Morgan?" he asked. "That's right. Received a complaint about illegal surveillance equipment, property line violations, and unauthorized electrical modifications." I raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "An anonymous source," he replied, glancing toward Karen's house as if it were obvious. I showed him the permits for the minor upgrades I'd made, including my home office setup, and explained that the rest was personal security equipment within my rights as a homeowner. He nodded, took photos, and muttered, "This neighborhood, it's always something." But it didn't stop there. 2 hours later, a tow truck showed up at the end of the block. I watched from my window as the driver stepped out, walked around my parked SUV, and started prepping it for removal. I stormed outside. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The guy flinched. "I got a call from the HOA, said this vehicle was abandoned." "That's my vehicle. It's registered, insured, and parked in my driveway." He scratched his head, clearly caught in the middle. "Look, man, I'm just doing what the HOA office told me." "Who in the HOA?" I demanded. "A woman named Karen, of course." I pulled out my badge, not the one I use for local police interactions, but the one that carries real weight. "You're about to unlawfully tow a federal agent's vehicle. Turn around and leave. Now." He stepped back, hands up. "Say no." More, he packed up, muttering apologies as he drove away. Across the street, Karen stood on her porch with her arms folded, watching. Her expression, a twisted mixture of triumph and fear. She knew she'd crossed a line now, and her desperate smirk gave away that she didn't know whether to double down or back off. That evening, I got the call I'd been expecting. The bureau was coming in. A formal sting operation was authorized, based on the footage I'd secured. They were deploying a team of agents to conduct arrests, search warrants, and asset seizures related to the HOA's hidden financial dealings, some of which had Karen's fingerprints all over them. It turned out that the HOA's books, which she obsessively maintained and weaponized, had been used to launder small donations through shell maintenance expenses and inflated vendor invoices. Brett Hanley had been using HOA contributions to move money without triggering audit thresholds, and Karen, ever the control freak, had facilitated it unwittingly, or maybe knowingly, no one was sure yet. But she wasn't going to go quietly. The very next day, she called an emergency HOA meeting. She plastered flyers on every mailbox, rang doorbells, and claimed that there was a security threat in the neighborhood that needed immediate attention. When residents arrived at the clubhouse that evening, the atmosphere was thick with confusion. Karen stood at the podium with a microphone in hand and a printout of surveillance stills in the other. "This man," she began, pointing to a grainy image of me taken from one of her backyard cameras, "is not who he says he is. He has been recording all of you. He has tampered with HOA files. I believe he is working for a federal agency, or worse." The room buzzed with whispers, gasps, and raised eyebrows. I remained seated in the back row, letting her dig her hole. She continued, "I've contacted law enforcement. Cannot allow someone like this to jeopardize our safety. I am calling for an emergency motion to suspend his homeowner privileges and begin eviction proceedings." That was when I stood up. Calmly, quietly, I pulled out a folder from my coat and walked to the front. "Karen," I said evenly, "you might want to sit down." She glared at me. "You have no authority here." "That's where you're wrong," I said, flipping open the folder. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Special Agent David Morgan, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been working undercover in this neighborhood as part of an ongoing investigation into political corruption, money laundering, and HOA fraud." Gasps erupted across the room. Karen's mouth fell open. She shook her head. "No, this is a lie. He's making this up." I held up my credentials. "Everything you've said over the past month, every illegal 911 call, every harassment attempt, and your own surveillance recordings, you handed me the evidence I needed to bring down a network of criminal operations. Your HOA records contain doctored entries. Your meeting minutes reflect falsified approvals. You either helped commit these crimes or ignored them willfully. Either way, it's over." She dropped the microphone, literally. It thudded onto the podium as she backed away, red-faced, her knees trembling. Neighbors were filming. The very same people she had bullied for years now stared at her with cold disbelief. I didn't." "No," she whispered. "You should have thought of that before weaponizing 911, I said. Or before trying to tow my car, or accusing me of threatening you in public, or sending an inspector to my home on false pretenses." She turned and ran out of the clubhouse. Moments later, the FBI task force pulled into the neighborhood in unmarked vans, while plainclothes agents filtered in and began presenting warrants. The rest of the night unfolded like a movie. Brett Hanley was arrested in his backyard in front of his wife and 2 stunned teenage sons. Karen's home was searched and her computer seized. Financial records were collected from the HOA office. By midnight, the clubhouse had become a temporary federal evidence processing center. Residents stood on sidewalks in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. As for me, I walked home with Duke, removed the surveillance rig from my windows, and turned off my encrypted systems. My job here was almost done, but not quite. There were still a few unanswered questions. Chief among them, how much did Karen know? Was she just a nosy, power-drunk neighbor? Or was she a knowing accomplice in a political money funnel? The next morning, as the sun rose over Rose Hill Pines, the calm was almost unnerving. Karen's house was sealed with red tape, her mailbox stuffed with letters she'd never read. Her son Kyle had left during the night, according to neighbors, likely to avoid the mess his mother had created. I got a call from Bureau HQ just before noon. "Nice work, Morgan," my director said. "We've got enough to indict Hanley and 3 others, but Karen, we're still reviewing her involvement. If she turns out to be just another HOA lunatic, we'll let her be. If not..." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Copy that. I'll stay put until I get word." But I had a strange feeling this wasn't over, not yet. Because a person like Karen doesn't go down without a final act. And I could already sense that her story was about to take one last dramatic turn. Asterisk. The calm after the raid in Rose Hill Pines was almost deceptive, like the eye of a hurricane pretending to be a sunrise. With Karen's house sealed off, her computer seized, and Councilman Brett Hanley behind bars, it seemed like the storm had passed. The HOA office was padlocked, the board suspended by city order, and the FBI's presence had turned the once pristine neighborhood into a subdued zone of whispers and lawn chairs filled with gossiping retirees. But beneath the still surface, tension brewed. I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. People like Karen Delaney don't fold quietly, they simmer. They plot, and more importantly, they always believe the world has wronged them. I kept my daily routine normal. Walks with Duke, occasional nods to neighbors, and the occasional harmless chat with Tom across the street, who had fully embraced the fact that his neighbor was a federal agent and kept jokingly asking if he was. Next, Karen had vanished from the neighborhood, but not from the story. Every so often I'd catch whispers. A black sedan spotted near the clubhouse at night. A woman seen outside the HOA office door pulling at the lock. Someone tampering with the neighborhood bulletin board flyers. Even in her absence, Karen was a shadow that refused to disappear. Then, about 4 days after the raid, I received a secure call from an internal bureau number. The agent on the other line said simply, "You need to see this." Within the hour, a packet arrived under classified protocol. It contained a transcript, a grainy security camera photo, a burner phone ID. The transcript was from a recorded jailhouse conversation. Brett Hanley had spoken to someone on a monitored line. The name was redacted, but the content wasn't. She said she has files. If I go down, so will you. She's crazy enough to release everything. The image attached was from a truck stop security camera 3 towns over. The woman's face was half covered by sunglasses and a hoodie. But there was no doubt it was Karen. The burner phone she'd used had pinged twice more in nearby towns before going dark. Oh, my gut twisted. She hadn't just run away. She was building something. She knew her HOA career was over, but that only meant she'd move on to a bigger crusade, maybe against the government, maybe against me. I met with the Bureau's lead investigator the following morning. They think Karen had files that even we didn't get, she said. And if she feels cornered, she might try to go public or worse, frame you. That night, I tightened security around my home. Placed my cameras, re-encrypted my server, changed all my secure passwords. I dealt with terrorists, foreign agents, and mob bosses. None of them had quite the wild-card danger Karen did. Then it happened. 2 days later, at 3:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with a silent alarm from the garage motion sensor. I moved like instinct, gun drawn, silently descending the stairs, while Duke stayed trained beside me. In the darkness, I opened the garage door from the hallway and flicked the light on. The space was empty almost. One of the cabinet doors hung open. The cabinet had contained nothing more than car wash gear and tools, but now sitting on the ground beside it was a manila envelope. On the front, scrawled in red marker, "They lied to you." I retrieved it carefully, scanned it for traces, and opened it under my sterilized work light. Inside were printed photographs, lots of them. Screenshots from surveillance video, financial ledgers, emails, HOA board member names linked to a private construction firm. One file caught my eye, a proposed development plan for a Rose Hill expansion project, signed off by the HOA treasurer 2 years ago, but that treasurer had never been real. The name belonged to a dead woman whose identity was stolen. My hands tightened. These files had never surfaced in the first investigation. They had been hidden. Karen had them, and now somehow they were in my garage. The last page of the packet was a handwritten note. "Don't trust them. Have more. I'll go public unless I'm cleared." It was her Karen. She wasn't trying to run. She was trying to bargain. By morning, I met again with the bureau team and showed them the documents. The lead agent, Harper, looked pale as she flipped through them. "This is bigger than we thought. This is blackmail at a federal level." "And she's holding it," I said. "We underestimated her." Again, Harper leaned in. "I need to find her before she does something reckless." That evening, I received a call on an unregistered line, voice masked. But the cadence, the tone, the veiled fury, knew it was Karen. "You know I'm not lying," she hissed. "They used me. You're just their puppet. I did their dirty work, and now I'm the scapegoat." "Karen, this isn't the way," I said calmly. "You need to turn yourself in. Let the bureau protect you." She laughed, cold and sharp. "Protect me, like you protected the others. I have everything. Files, voice recordings. They won't. Silence me." The line went dead. I immediately forwarded the recording to Harper. Within the hour, she called back. "We're moving now. Stay put, but be ready. She's unraveling." For the next 3 days, we hunted. Traces of Karen appeared. All across the region. An ATM withdrawal here. A rest stop sighting there. A gas station receipt signed with the same fake name she used at the HOA. Meanwhile, an online conspiracy board started lighting up with cryptic posts saying, "Anonymous user dumping HOA documents tied to real estate corruption. Fake zoning permits." Even hints at a false flag operation involving community policing. She wasn't just sending a message. She was building an audience. She wanted vindication. She wanted to be a whistleblower, a hero in her own narrative, the martyr who got betrayed by the machine she thought she controlled. Then Harper called again. "We got a location. Remote cabin in Miller's Grove. Old Ranger Station. You're going in with us." I geared up, bulletproof vest under a gray jacket, sidearm secured, eyes focused. This wasn't just a take, it was a rescue mission for the truth. When we arrived at the cabin, the trees were whispering in the wind like they already knew what was coming. The team moved in silently, flanking the perimeter. I took point on the porch, knocked once, twice. "Karen," I called out. "It's David. I'm not here to arrest you. I just want to talk." No response. Then from inside, movement. A figure appeared through the dusty glass hair, disheveled, eyes wide, hand gripping a file folder so tightly her knuckles were white. "Don't come any closer," she barked. "I'll burn it all, I swear." "You don't need to do this," I said slowly. "You've already done the hard part. You exposed something real. But this isn't the way to fix it. They made me the villain," she shouted. "All I did was enforce the rules. I kept things clean, organized, and they used me." I took a step forward. "Oh. You can still walk out of here with dignity. You can be the reason this corruption is finally stopped. But if you torch that evidence, they win. All of them, the people who used you." Her hand trembled. She looked down at the folder, then back at me. I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to be respected. But they just needed a puppet. "You're not a puppet anymore," I said. Quietly. "You're the key witness." Silence. Then slowly, the door creaked open. Karen stepped out, folder held out like it weighed 100 pounds. Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't know who you were," she whispered. "I thought you were the threat." "I know," I said. "And now, we're on the same side." The folder was filled with the final pieces, audio recordings, full financial logs, notes from secret meetings, everything. Karen had turned from tyrant to informant in the most chaotic way possible, but she had delivered. As Harper took custody of her, I watched the neighborhood's worst nightmare become its unexpected savior. And yet, something still told me this wasn't over. Not with the kind of secrets Karen had been holding for so long. The fire she'd started had already spread. We just hadn't seen where it would ignite next. The moment Karen was taken into federal custody, everything in Rose Hill Pines began to shift like a dam finally giving way under pressure. The truth didn't just ripple, it crashed through the community. For a woman once feared and mocked as the petty tyrant of the HOA, she now sat at the center of a national investigation into political corruption, municipal fraud, and civil rights violations committed under the cloak of community standards. The files she turned over in that remote cabin were damning not just to the HOA board, but to city officials, real estate developers, and even to state representatives. They painted a picture of collusion, kickbacks, zoning, manipulation, and how Karen had unknowingly helped enforce unlawful schemes for years, simply by following orders she believed were legitimate policy. But once she knew and chose to expose it, the game changed. Karen's cooperation earned her a temporary immunity, agreement in exchange for full testimony and cooperation with federal agents. She wasn't proud, far from it. During her first formal debrief, she broke down twice, admitting she had been obsessed with control, terrified of irrelevance, and blinded by the illusion of power the HOA had granted her. She confessed to every 911 call, every harassment complaint, every policy violation she'd filed against neighbors, not to protect the community, but because it gave her purpose. It was as if being the enforcer of the rules made her feel needed. But when she discovered that same HOA was laundering money and hiding crimes behind her back, her sense of betrayal pushed her into rebellion.
Ow.
As she gave statement after statement, more and more dominoes began to fall. The Bureau issued 27 federal subpoenas, uncovered a fake construction bidding network, arrested for more people who had been named in Karen's files. Even the mayor's name surfaced in a phone transcript, and within a month, he resigned. News vans rolled into Rose Hill Pines. Reporters knocked on doors. "How does it feel to live next to the HOA whistleblower?" one asked. But most residents still just remembered Karen as the woman who fined them for mismatched mailboxes and called 911 over trash bins left out too long. It was surreal watching her go from villain to unexpected hero. Meanwhile, I continued reporting to the Bureau, filing documentation, overseeing the cleanup operation, and monitoring any potential retaliation. Duke, ever loyal, remained my shadow throughout. Some nights, as I walked him through the neighborhood, I could still feel the eyes of those who had lived under Karen's rule for years. Most had forgiven her. Some couldn't, but one thing was certain: no one would forget what she had done and undone. On the 6th week after the raid, we held a formal HOA meeting. This time, it was not inside the plush clubhouse, but outside on the community green, open to all. The new interim board? Members were elected by direct vote. There would be no secret meetings, no fines without due process, and no enforcement without transparency. I stayed out of the election. My job was never to lead this neighborhood. It was to clean out the rot. As I stood quietly in the back, arms folded, I watched real democracy take shape for the first time in Rose Hill Pines. The new president, an elderly librarian named Martha, spoke plainly. "We forgot that neighbors are supposed to talk to each other, not report each other. That ends now." The crowd applauded. Karen, however, was nowhere to be seen. She had been relocated as part of the Bureau's witness protection protocol, though rumors swirled that she was writing a memoir. Hoping to explain herself, if she ever returned to public life, it would be as a complicated figure part, cautionary tale, part redemption arc. But as for me, my time in Rose Hill Pines was over. I was assigned to a new case across the state, another suburban nest hiding behind carefully trimmed hedges and vinyl siding. I packed my things, secured the house, gave Duke one last walk down the familiar path, and nodded to Tom across the street, who simply grinned and said, "Tell your next HOA to watch their backs." I laughed, then climbed into my SUV and drove away. But before I left town, I made one final stop, the park bench near the entrance of the community, where a plaque now sat. It read, "In memory of community, lost and found again." I smiled, knowing that while the files, arrests, and corruption cases would eventually fade into bureaucracy, the legacy left behind would echo much longer. People had started looking out for each other again. Fences were still there, but now, so were the conversations over them. That might be the biggest win of all. If this story has taught you anything, it's this. Never underestimate the power of one person to unravel a line, no matter how annoying, loud, or difficult that person may be. Sometimes the villain becomes the hero, and sometimes the enforcer becomes the whistleblower. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most unlikely person you fear might be the one who saves you. If you want to hear more real drama that flips everything upside down, don't forget to subscribe to the Sham Stories YouTube channel for stories just like this one. 3 months had passed since the final HOA meeting at Rose Hill Pines. Although the surface of the community had returned to some sense of normalcy, there was a new kind of alertness pulsing underneath the smiling neighbors and freshly mowed lawns. The ghost of Karen's reign still lingered in the cracks of the sidewalks, and in the hesitant waves between people who had once feared a fine for their porch plants. With Karen gone and living under bureau protection, after surrendering her cache of documents and exposing the web of municipal corruption, it would have been easy to think the story was over, but I had a gut feeling it wasn't. I'd seen this before. A corrupt organization gets cut down, the figurehead falls, the public celebrates, but someone always tries to sew the pieces back together again. A week into my new assignment, several counties away, I got the call. Not from Harper, my partner on the Karen case, but from a local precinct captain in Rose Hill Pines. He told me hesitantly that a woman claiming to be an emergency HOA recovery consultant had started meeting quietly with homeowners in nearby communities. She was introducing herself under a different name, Sharon Delancey, but the captain had reviewed security footage and said plainly, "It's Karen." She changed her hair and her voice, but it's her. At first, I couldn't believe it. Karen had been granted limited immunity in exchange for full cooperation. But that didn't include reinventing herself to resume her HOA crusade. If she was actively trying to embed herself into another community infrastructure under a false identity, she wasn't just violating her agreement, she was inviting the wrath of every agency she'd crossed. I made contact with Harper, and within 24 hours we were back in surveillance mode. Harper and I reviewed the photos, grainy but unmistakable. Karen, now Sharon, was dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit, clipboard in hand, walking side by side with residents of the Cedar Glen community, 30 miles north of Rose Hill Pines. The similarities were chilling. New community newsletter. Anonymous HOA complaint boxes installed. Signs about parking rules and fence heights. It was Karen's playbook all over again, dressed in a new color scheme. Even worse, she had aligned herself with a disgraced former city contractor named Joel Atkins, one of the people she had initially testified against. That was the moment we knew she was playing both sides. She'd used the bureau, used me, to eliminate her rivals in Rose Hill Pines, only to rebuild her HOA empire from scratch, with new pawns and deeper pockets. It wasn't just obsessive control, this time it was retaliation. Over the next few days, we built a timeline of her movements. Karen had been laying groundwork even before the raid at her house. She had met Atkins online through a private HOA consultant network, forged references, secured fake real estate documents to suggest she was a property manager, and had quietly purchased a home in Cedar Glen under a shell company. The move wasn't just premeditated, it was methodical. She had manipulated the bureau, evaded surveillance, and played the victim card so convincingly that even Harper was stunned. "I'll say it," Harper said, pacing the room. "She's more dangerous now than she ever was." I agreed. Karen wasn't just a rogue HOA president anymore. She was building a private empire using manipulated legal loopholes and weak local enforcement. We had to act, but without a clear federal violation, beyond impersonation and indirect fraud, she was. Skating on the edges of what we could arrest her for. That's when I decided to go back undercover. This time not as a resident, but as a compliance officer for a newly founded real estate group. It took 2 days to set up the alias, get fake IDs, and position myself as a potential ally for Karen's newly formed HOA consultancy. I reached out to her via an encrypted app used by private zoning groups, offering a joint project in a new community looking for guidance. She responded in less than 30 minutes. I'd be honored to assist. Always happy to help neighborhoods achieve excellence. The meeting was set at a neutral cafe in Ridge Valley. I arrived first and watched through the tinted windows as she pulled up. Karen, or Sharon, as she now called herself, looked calm, collected, and more polished than ever. But the eyes were the same, sharp, distrustful, dangerous. She didn't recognize me at first. My beard, posture, and outfit were carefully chosen to throw her off. I introduced myself with my alias Colin Garrison, Senior Compliance Advisor for Highland Equity Properties. We talked for 45 minutes. She explained her methods, how she could turn any HOA into a disciplinary model, how she handled resident resistance, and how she offered quiet crisis management. Every word dripped with the same authoritarian venom I'd heard. In her 911 calls months ago, I asked casually if she'd ever had issues with law enforcement. She laughed. There was some drama in my last community, she said, but it was all political. They were corrupt. I exposed them, and I paid the price. That was the moment I knew Karen hadn't changed. She had simply rewritten the narrative in her favor. Ended the meeting cordially, promising to get her in touch with our legal team. As she walked away, I snapped a covert photo and sent it directly to Harper. Confirmed. She's fully operational. We moved to phase 2. Over the next 2 weeks, we built the case. Interviews with Cedar Glen residents revealed she'd already issued 12 private fines, recommended to foreclosures, and threatened to report a veteran for refusing to remove a flag display. Harper and I compiled every infraction, compared them to HOA laws, and tracked her connection to Joel Atkins, who was secretly funneling money into a property improvement fund that didn't exist. We were ready, but we needed Karen to cross one more line. She had to initiate fraud or impersonation across state lines to make it federal. That's when I baited the trap. Using my alias, I invited her to a meeting with a group of investors based in a neighboring state, telling her they were interested in launching a pilot HOA with her consultancy model. She agreed eagerly, submitted documentation under her fake name, and requested payment upfront to her Shell account. That was it. The moment the funds crossed state lines, it became a federal offense. With warrants in hand, we moved in. Karen was arrested at her Cedar Glen home, still clutching a folder of new regulations she'd planned to implement that week. Her expression when she saw me remove my fake beard and badge was priceless, equal parts betrayal and fury. "Used me," she spat. "You always were the threat." "No," I said quietly, "you were." As we loaded her into the black SUV, neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Some were shocked, some nodded knowingly. The reign of HOA Karen was over again, but this time there would be no second chance. She had violated the terms of her immunity, lied under oath, and attempted to defraud multiple communities across state lines. The charges stuck. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, misuse of public trust. She was going away for a long time. And I stood in the empty Cedar Glen clubhouse later that evening. It was eerily quiet. The place smelled like lemon polish and deception. "Do you think she ever believed she was helping people?" Harper asked. I shrugged. I think she believed she was owed power. Helping people was just the story she told herself to sleep at night. Outside, a new sign was being installed. Community under new management. And this time, we'd make sure it stayed that way. The sentencing took place on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that felt ordinary on the surface, but buzzed underneath with the kind of energy that only comes when justice is close at hand. Karen stood in the courtroom in a navy blue blazer, her trademark rigidity replaced by a cold defiance that still simmered behind her carefully neutral expression. The judge listed off the charges one by one: wire fraud, impersonation, abuse of authority, interference with federal investigations, and obstruction of justice. Each count echoed through the courtroom like a hammer on a bell, and yet Karen didn't flinch. She refused to speak during her trial, refused to acknowledge the pain she had caused, and refused to admit the lengths she had gone to in order to control, dominate, and humiliate those around her under the banner of neighborhood order. The judge sentenced her to 17 years in a federal facility with no chance of parole for at least 11. Her crimes had not only targeted homeowners, but had manipulated the very structures of local governance, safety, and federal trust. She had crossed every line, all in the name of control. And now, the gavel came down for the last time. Outside the courthouse, the reaction was mixed. Some of the residents from Cedar Glen and Rose Hill Pines stood together, united not by friendship, but by survival. Few carried small signs, one reading, "Never again, HOA tyranny." But most just wanted to see her leave. To see the woman who had fined them, frightened them, threatened them, arrested them, and used the very systems that were meant to protect them as weapons. Karen was loaded into the van, and with that, the final chapter of her terror came to a close, or so we thought. Back at the bureau, we wrapped up the operation that had taken over the better part of a year. Harper was promoted, and I was offered a position in the Bureau's Community Corruption Task Force. A new initiative sparked by what had happened in Rose Hill Pines. It turned out, Karen's story wasn't just about one HOA or one bad apple. It was about how easy it was to let petty power and unchecked authority slip into full-blown abuse when no one was watching. We'd learned that homeowners associations, despite being seen as trivial or suburban formalities, could be weaponized when placed in the hands of someone who understood how to bend rules without technically breaking them until they did. And we were seeing similar patterns in other towns, with new names, new Karens, new flags of power being waved over innocent people's homes and lives. I accepted the role. I knew I was done pretending to be someone else, done infiltrating neighborhoods. Undercover. But I wasn't done fighting. This time the mission was bigger. We created a protocol called the Karen Clause, an internal Bureau alert system that flagged HOA complaints filed through 911 where repeated abuse patterns were identified. It gave homeowners a direct line to federal assistance when their community leaders turned into oppressors. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As for Rose Hill Pines, it healed slowly. The new HOA, stripped of fines and empowered by open voting and transparency, thrived. Kids played freely again. People decorated their houses without fear. Sidewalk chalk returned. One resident even started an annual block party called Freedom from Fines. And yes, Duke the dog became the unofficial mascot of the neighborhood, loved and spoiled by everyone. On the 1-year anniversary of Karen's arrest, I was invited back by the new board to give a small speech about civic protection and the dangers of local tyranny. I declined the microphone but left them with a message. Never let anyone tell you your home belongs to them more than it belongs to you. After the gathering, I stood quietly on the edge of the crowd and watched people laugh, hug, share stories. That's when I knew it had all been worth it. What started as a simple HOA complaint turned into a storm that uncovered corruption, exposed power-hungry agendas, and revealed what could happen when neighbors stop speaking to each other and start reporting each other instead. Karen may have been extreme, but she was a symptom of something deeper, a warning. And now, with her gone, that warning echoed even louder. To anyone watching this, ask yourself, how much control do you really have over your own home, over your neighborhood? Could someone like Karen rise in your town and turn it into a prison disguised as a community? If your answer is maybe, then it's time to pay attention. If you found this story powerful, eye-opening, or just plain shocking, then you need to subscribe to the Sham Stories YouTube channel. We bring you real neighborhood drama, outrageous power plays, the kind of jaw-dropping tales you won't believe could actually happen, but did. You don't want to miss what's coming next, because trust me, in the world of HOA Karens, there's always another one just around the corner.